6. Retreat to the ruins. Charlotte winced against the morning light as she peered past the lace curtains and sipped the steaming cup of tea. It was Mary, the chambermaid, not Mrs. Givens, who had roused her this morning. Mrs. Givens would be personally attending to the Earnshaw breakfast, thank heavens. Charlotte was in no mood for another confrontation, especially at this early hour. She looked down at the men's breeches that bunched at her hips. The later Mrs. Givens saw her, the better. She turned, took in the familiar trappings of her bedchamber. Could a house have a life of its own? She believed that now more than ever. She rubbed the goosebumps that shimmied from her fingertips to her arms, as if she could as easily rub away that had hovered over her bed, and finished dressing. Charlotte slipped arms into the baggy sleeves of her father's old cambric shirt, and stuffed the shirt tail into the riding breeches. As a finishing touch, she pulled on his favourite waistcoat and buttoned it, lingering over the wooden buttons. He would certainly scold her for robbing his closets again, but no, today she knew he would not. Today he would understand her need for all things familiar. The entire household had risen to her screams, but they found nothing. Mrs. Givens had given her a gentle reprimand for her foolish flight of fancy, and a heavy draught of brandy. But the fear that she saw in her father's eyes proved that he believed her. He would not rest until the servants had thoroughly scoured each room of each wing of the mansion. Yes, the house most certainly had a life of its own. Charlotte pulled her haphazardly woven braid from beneath the vest and thrust a soft pair of doeskin gloves into her pocket. What she needed now was some fresh Cornwall air and a good ride to clear her thoughts. She strode purposefully through the plain, unfurbished corridors away from the main wing. Her heavy-soled boots thudded down creaking stairs that led past the servants' quarters. Only the delicious aroma of oatcakes halted her escape. Charlotte pushed through the heavy swinging doors of the kitchen, practically colliding with a maid whose arms were laded with a joint of ham. She stopped to inhale the heady aroma. Warm and cheerful, the kitchen was furnished with sprawling tables, mismatched chairs, and massive dressers groaning with crockery and foodstuffs. A vast range fitted with ovens and boilers, belching tantalizing smoke as a battery of saucepans mirrored its flames. Before the range stood Mrs. Givens, spatula in hand, wiping a moist palm on her apron. A row of oatcakes sizzled before her. Deftly, Charlotte leaned around the plump back, scooped up a scorching cake, and popped it into her mouth. Mrs. Givens whirled about, spatula wielded high, before she suddenly stopped short at the familiar sight. "Miss Earnshaw, and what do you think you're doing dressed like that?" Charlotte shrugged, her mouth filled with oatcake. "And how many times must I tell ye that it is unseemly for a young lady such as yourself to be in the servants' quarters?" "But I've always come here," Charlotte protested as she reached for another cake. "That was then, this is now." Mrs. Givens swatted the offending hand. "Now, you must learn to behave properly as a lady of your own household. Your fiancé is waiting for you this very second." "Derek? Here?" Charlotte choked, then swallowed hard. Mrs. Givens shooed a servant with a steaming tureen of porridge out the door before she took Charlotte to a corner with conspiratorial zeal. "The whole household's a buzz about Master Earnshaw's predicament. Apparently your young Earl is here to stake his claim, so to speak. You would already think the master was gone." She snorted in disgust. Wincing at the boldness of her last statement, she added, "1,000 pardons, miss, but with Lord Earnshaw going to Africa and such, that leaves Master Galway to do as he pleases with Highgate and with his gambling debts." Charlotte blinked at the onslaught. Gambling debts? But the Galways are among the wealthiest families in the land. Aye, the eldest brother has inherited a vast fortune, but as for Master Derek, that's a cad of a different stripe. 'Tis no secret that he's frittered away what fortune was left, and he was on the prowl for an heiress." A brace of maids bustled into the kitchen, retrieving platters of cheese and sausage, Halting Mrs. Given's dire litany, she placed a plump hand upon Charlotte's. "I'm afeard I may have said too much already, lass." Its warmth made Charlotte realise that her own had grown stone cold. "No, pray continue." "Well," the old woman went on, "the word this morning is that Highgate is most certainly in jeopardy, since the master may not return. It is fair and hard and all." Emotion choked her into silence. "Do you truly think that, Mrs. Givens?" The old woman responded with a guilty shrug. Angrily, Charlotte gripped her shoulders, voice shaking with conviction. "Then let me promise you that Papa shall return very much alive. I give you my word of honour." A teary smile flitted across the weathered face. "I certainly hope so, miss, for all our sakes." Mrs. Givens dabbed her eyes with her apron as a young girl rushed up in breathless agitation. "Pardon me, ma'am, but Master Derek's getting peevish for his oatcakes." Charlotte could see the despair registered at the mention of Derek's name. With perfunctory efficiency, Mrs. Givens scooped the warm cakes onto a heavy platter, proffering them to the girl. "Now be quick, lass, before they get cold." Mrs. Givens' head turned with surprise as Charlotte whisked it from her hands. "Let me, Mrs. Givens. I shall deliver them personally." "Not dressed like that, you won't. No young lady of proper breeding would allow." Charlotte purposefully marched through the kitchen doors, holding the oatcakes aloft like a prize of war. The platter crashed in front of Derek, scattering oat cakes over the starched tablecloth. Derek scanned the disaster before him, then calmly met a heated glare. "I see the serving wenches grow more comely by the day." He lifted a broken cake to his mouth, then chewed slowly. His eyes defied her as he brushed crumbs from his lips. "Delicious. You must try one, my dear." Disgusted, Charlotte turned away. She scanned the length of the vast dining table to her father perched at the end. She could see the perplexed arch of silver brow over his spectacles. Fiona sat in the centre, dressed in a yellow muslin that enhanced her dark curls. Ivory tulle rustled at her throat as she turned stiffly in Charlotte's direction. Charlotte would have thought her lovely, except for the scowl. Fiona pointed an accusing finger. "Papa, she is wearing your clothes again." Standing opposite her, Charlotte angrily leaned across the table, but her sharp retort never left her lips. Earnshaw had risen to his feet, his own sober gaze fixing her where she stood. "Daughter, you have tried my patience to the breaking point. I shall endure no more. Please sit down." "But, Papa—" "Why must you always cause trouble?" Fiona glowered, satin brows at her breasts quivering. "One would think gypsies had raised you. Lord knows you dress like one. Unlike you, who dresses like a wedding cake." "Papa, did you hear how she insulted me?" "I did no such thing. I was merely—" "Charlotte!" Earnshaw fixed a stony eye on his youngest, who sank into her chair in a sulking heap. "We have much to discuss about the future of Highgate. Lord Galway and I have decided—" "Lord Galway?" Charlotte flared. "And pray tell, what business does Lord Galway have discussing the future of Highgate?" "Why, every business in the world, my own dear heart." Derek's honeyed words hung over the table like a dark cloud. Heads turned in unison, for soon I shall be its new caretaker. Derek cast a patronizing smile before he turned his full attentions to a thick slice of ham. He attacked it with a hearty, self-satisfied gusto of a sovereign well-versed in handling his subjects. Charlotte had to concede he looked every bit the part, from the elegant broadcloth of his high-cut riding-coat to the gleaming Hessian boots. Every inch of him emanated refinement and breeding. Even the tightly fitted riding breeches that moulded every sinew and muscle to carefully tailored perfection. Earnshaw stiffened at Derrick's smug indifference, but continued, "Precisely, as I am sure you know all too well, due to circumstances beyond my control, I am bound to take my leave of Highgate for the distant shores of Africa." The colour drained visibly from his cheeks as he straightened his glasses. "Of course, this will require considerable adjustment for us all. Master Galway has been so kind as to consent to be temporary custodian of our fair estate." Charlotte lurched to her feet as a chair grated violently on the parquet floor. This was too much. The smile remained frozen on Derrick's face, but the curve of his jaw had hardened. He lowered a teacup. "So I see that my darling Charlotte has lost her appetite." He fixed her with cold, emotionless eyes. "Not to worry, my dear. Nothing will interfere with our engagement. Indeed," the smile returned, "your father has consented to our nuptials before his departure." "But that is an impossibility." Charlotte could hear her own voice resonating with unexpected force and a strange calm. Derrick lifted a quizzical eyebrow. "For you see, my lord," she chose her words carefully, "I have chosen to break off our engagement. It means that I have chosen to accompany my father to Africa." Charlotte did not wait to defend herself against the uproar. She swiftly moved to her father, touched his cheek. Bent with shock, he sat motionless. "I entreat you, daughter, do not do this." Charlotte attempted a half-hearted smile. "I must do what my heart tells me, Papa." Her fingers caressed his face. "And it tells me that I have made the right decision." Earnshaw could only shake his head in mute denial. "Then let me entreat you." Derrick rose to his feet. His hand still grasped the cup in powerful shaking fingers. He spoke slowly. "You simply can't leave. I suppose that after a girl has refused an earl, she may do what she pleases." Charlotte gazed into her father's eyes before she turned to Derrick. "I am terribly sorry, but it appears that neither I nor Highgate require your services any longer." She would not allow herself to see the reaction on Derrick's face. Surely it would be too terrible. Charlotte turned on her heel and strode to the door. The sound of shattering porcelain ricocheted in her ears. Hearing the familiar whinny, Charlotte drew in the musky odour of hay and leather. Her eyes sought the dim recesses of the ancient stable, until they stopped short at the hungry gleam that came from the corner. The large dunhead swung over the door of its stall, ears twitching with excitement. Teeth flashed as rubbery lips quivered and stretched out over Charlotte's palm, and inhaled the small oatcake. Charlotte wiped her hand on the heavy neck, then tugged at the peppery forelock as she leaned over the door. "Oh, Polly, you greedy thing! You couldn't wait, could you?" Polly grunted as her lips roamed in search of another oatcake, but Charlotte pushed the huffing muzzle aside and lifted a bridle over the velvet soft ears. "Not today, old girl. Today you must work for your breakfast." Charlotte led the aged mare from her stall and looked doubtfully at the gnarled legs and swaying back. Most likely Polly was older than she was. In her entire life, Charlotte had known no other mount, and though an accomplished horsewoman, she had refused her father's generous offers of other pedigreed and younger horses. For years she had insisted that only her old Polly carry her, but today, for the first time, she could not deny that time was taking its toll. She stroked the greying muzzle before lifting the light saddle to Polly's back. At least that wouldn't be a burden, not like the cumbersome side saddle her sister used. She wryly looked down at her father's riding breeches, and yes, indeed, there were some benefits of being a man. Restlessly, Polly ambled for the door, shaking her dark mane in anticipation of the ride to come. Charlotte mounted as they reached the blaze of morning light. Squinting against the unaccustomed glare, she was too busy to notice the figure bearing down on her. Only when she leaned over to pat the dusky neck did she find herself staring down at Derek. "May I ask you why you are running away to Africa?" Derek scowled, hands locking around Polly's bridle. Charlotte was struck how physically perfect Derek was. His pale hair, artfully curled at his temples, set off his cheekbones that were as finely chiselled as the emerald he sported in the silk cravat at his throat. Only a purplish bruise encircling his eyes bore testimony to the night before. Polly shifted restlessly, but Derek held firm, even as Charlotte could feel her own hand clench around the riding crop. "I am not running away. My father will have much need of me." Charlotte's gaze caught a flash of yellow in the distance. Fiona, coming in a purposeful stride, was closing in. Charlotte tightened the reins. "Surely it is better for us all." "Then you are more of a fool than I thought. You are willing to throw your life away for what? A broken old man?" Charlotte looked down in disbelief. "How dare you speak of my father in such a manner? You have gone beyond all bounds, sir, and I will expect you to never broach the subject again. Now, I will thank you to unhand my horse." Instead, Derek moved closer and grabbed the pommel. "Then let me tell you something, my cherub." Derek's body pressed against her, his voice taunting. She felt his hand tightening against her thigh in a fierce caress. "What difference will a year make? I'll still be here, waiting for you. He is dead already." In one sweeping motion, the riding crop savagely slashed across Derek's face. Derek's howl of pain fused with Polly's terrified squeal. The mare bolted for freedom. Charlotte barely saw Fiona's frantic rush to Derek's side before Polly galloped headlong across the manicured estate and into the untamed countryside. The mare ran unrestrained across what rocks and stones, hills and valleys Charlotte did not know. She pressed herself into the massive neck and let Highgate Manor drift into the past as they galloped to their unseen destination. The only thing that Charlotte was aware of was that they were travelling north. North, where she played as a child. North, where she had been forbidden to go. Rising upward rose the ruins of an ancient hill castle, cradled in billowing clouds. A cool breeze whistled about her ears, interrupted only by the sound of Polly's laboured breathing and the sound of hooves behind her. She looked back and recognized the enormous chestnut hunter. Even from this distance she knew its rider was pushing him hard. She could see the rhythm of the whip violently urging the chestnut on. She could see the glint of sun shimmer on the silver-blonde hair. Her only thought was to run. Polly groaned as Charlotte urged her forward, but gamely the mare responded, charging up a grassy knoll in powerful, lumbering strides. Charlotte could see heavy flecks of lather and foam darken the golden neck. She turned her face to catch a glimpse of her pursuer. He was gaining fast. Charlotte leaned into the mare's neck and heard the lungs gasping for air, the laboured breath. She looked back and saw Derek. Savagely he whipped his chestnut forward, and the animal surged next to her, his body leaning into hers. "Do you want me to ride you down like a dog?" His voice was shrill. "If I must, I'll kill her. I swear." Beaten, she pulled the reins in, the old horse almost stumbling with exhaustion, sides heaving like great bellows. Derek ripped one of Polly's reins from Charlotte's hand and took control, wrapping it around his own pommel. They were slowing now, climbing a hill, wandering through an ancient collection of disintegrated pillars. Charlotte stared down in shocked silence. The animal's legs shook violently. She could have killed Polly. How could she have done such a cruel thing? "Shall I help you down?" Derek sneered, panting heavily. Coming to her senses, Charlotte looked about her. Ancient granite walls were outlined by a vivid blue sky. She knew this place. She quickly slid from the saddle, avoiding Derek's waiting arms and petulant scowl. Circumventing him, she peered over a crumbling wall and gazed in all directions, taking in the jagged line of the ramparts that stopped short at the massive cliff. It was all so familiar. "You played here as a child," Derek's voice intruded from behind. "I know when you learned to ride, where you used to fish. I know the estates where you trespassed." She looked back at him, surprised. The corners of his mouth twitched. "You would break in through the shuttered windows." Charlotte gasped with shock. An odd smile contorted Derek's face. "You see, I know you more than you realize, dear Charlotte." He strode up to her, removing his jacket, his face impassive. "I even know where you used to bathe naked in the coves." "But how?" Charlotte was stunned. He moved closer, loosening his cravat. "I watched you." Derek shoved her against the wall, crushing her into the rough-hewn hedges of shale and stone, his body pinning hers beneath his own. His hand snaked to her chin and painfully wrenched her jaw open before his mouth covered hers in a punishing invasion of lips and teeth. His pelvis ground into hers. He wrenched her flailing arms back as he tore his mouth from hers, eyes gleaming. "I watched you for years and years, and you never saw me, until that day I was taking one of our hounds, some useless bitch to task. Then you appeared. Do you remember?" Charlotte blinked back her confusion. "You?" "Yes, me. You beat me with my own whip. Some scrap of a girl in men's clothing beat me." Derek's hand travelled down to her throat. "Do you know what it's like to be beaten every day of your life? I did as a child until my father died, rot his soul." Derek's voice strangled with vivid recollection. His grip loosened. Now it tightened once again as he glowered into her eyes. "I never forgave you for that, my darling." The other hand skimmed her body until it reached her breeches. "Now we shall finish what you started so many years ago." He fumbled at the buttons. Swearing with impatience, Derek reached down with the other hand. That was all she needed. Furiously, she kicked upwards. Her knee found its mark, and Derek sank to the ground in agony. Panting and furious, she dropped to his side. Her voice shook with emotion as she looked down at the powerful shoulders bent in pain. "You shall never force yourself on me again. Do you understand? No man shall. There will be no wedding." Breathlessly, she ran back to Polly, gathering up the reins. Only the savage, tormented laughter turned her around. Derek was still crouching, his hands clutching himself. However, he was calm now, a strange, beatific smile contorting the aristocratic features. "Do you think you can change anything? I will have you yet, on my terms." "Never!" She shook so hard she thought her knees would buckle. Angrily she mounted, her thighs trembling against Polly's flanks. Derek staggered to his feet. "And if you think you will keep your precious Highgate manor from me, you are sadly mistaken." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Lord Earnshaw boasts 2 marriageable daughters, not 1, 2. Derek's smile radiated pure malice. Tears stung Charlotte's eyes as she wheeled Polly away and galloped down the hill. She could not bear that terrible smile 1 second longer. She knew not where she was going, nor whether the words that stung her ears with the wintry breeze were real or imagined. "Fly away, little bird. I'll catch you yet." "May I touch it?" "Only if you're a good girl. Are you a good girl?" From the foyer, Fiona's sharp intake of breath was followed by a nervous giggle. A teasing baritone chuckle imposed an insolent counterpoint to the strains of Chopin. Yes, I can see you are a very good girl indeed. Charlotte's fingers crashed furiously onto the harpsichord keys as Fiona shrieked with laughter. The small music room reverberated with a jarring cacophony, then hushed to painful silence. Charlotte looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Her concentration was shattered, but she could not blame Fiona. It had been destroyed for days. She looked up. She had always loved this room. Tucked cosily away from the main ballroom, the chamber was filled with stray bits of furniture, neglected plants, and various unused instruments from every continent. Verily, it bore her father's mark, and, like him, it reminded her of a comfortable overstuffed chair. But even here she could not escape the distinct and terrible changes that had taken place in the Earnshaw household. From behind the velvet-curtained doorway, Fiona emerged. She wore an evening gown of electric blue silk embroidered with lush crimson roses. Truly, everything about Fiona seemed to radiate a breathy excitement, from the plunging neckline to the distracted flutter of her silk fan. As she gave an embarrassed smile, only a violent smear of lip rouge marred her impeccable countenance. Charlotte knew only one person could do this to her sister. As if on cue, Fiona pulled Derek into the doorway, placing a possessive hand over his. He flourished a small pistol before he pocketed it. "Oh, are we disturbing you?" Derek smirked at Charlotte with mock innocence. "I was just showing this angel an old family heirloom, and I just got carried away." He turned back to Fiona and pressed both hands fervently to his lips. "You will forgive me, my darling?" Fiona was mesmerized. "Of course, my lord." Derek's pale head dipped to hers, his lips nearly touching a quivering earring. "You must always call me Derek." Fiona practically swooned. "Yes, Derek." Charlotte slammed the harpsichord lid shut, almost crushing her own fingers, but at least she had their attention. "I am sorry to disturb this little tete-a-tete, but if you don't mind, Lord Galway, I would appreciate a word with my sister, in private." Charlotte's eyes met Derek's in a simmering scowl, daring him to defy her. His gaze was pleasant, the planes of his face moulded like marble in the gaslight. There was no doubt that he was in control of this household, and he knew it. His smile, bemused, betrayed nothing. "But of course, your wish is my command, Miss Earnshaw. Especially since this is your last night at Highgate, is it not?" Unable to bear his devilish scrutiny, Charlotte's gaze focused on the wilting philodendron at his elbow. Truly, this was her last night. After tonight, Derek would do as he pleased, at her sister's behest. "You know very well we depart tomorrow, therefore you can certainly understand my eagerness to share my last remaining hours with my sister, alone." The smile tightened before he took a step forward. Charlotte instinctively shrank back from the proffered hand, and the smile faded. "Then I shall bid you farewell, Miss Earnshaw, till we meet again." Charlotte's voice was flat and final. "Farewell, Lord Galway." His fist clenched imperceptibly before he bowed with a gentlemanly flourish, turning on his heel. He strode past Fiona with supreme indifference, though Fiona gazed after him with longing eyes. She turned back to Charlotte, hissing, "You offended him!" "I offended him? What on earth is that scoundrel doing here in the first place?" "Watch your tongue, you are speaking of the man I love." "Indeed? And are we speaking of the same person?" This is the same man that threw you over without a second thought. And he has returned, reformed and repentant. He has come back for me." Fiona tossed her dark ringlets with triumph, then strummed her fan languorously across her throat. Regaining her composure, she glared at Charlotte. "And I shall have him, and neither you nor anyone else shall take him from me ever again." Frustration tempted Charlotte to hurl the music stand that stood between them. Instead, she pressed her palms to her temples as she strode away from her sister. "But don't you see what he is doing? He is just using you for his own selfish ambition." "Are you referring to his debts?" "Yes, his gambling debts, to be precise. Doesn't that mean anything?" "Yes, it most certainly does. But you will not be happy to hear me speak of it." Fiona could not conceal the hint of smile and the disdainful lift of her chin. Charlotte crossed her arms with impatience. "Indeed? And what is so terrible that I cannot hear?" "Quite simply, you are jealous." Fiona savoured every word. They landed with the impact of a boulder crashing into a still pond. Charlotte was stunned. "Have you gone mad?" she exploded. "If you remember, it was I who threw over Derek." Fiona smiled serenely. "Derek told me that is what you would say. He told me the truth. He told me that after you had finished making a spectacle of yourself, you realized your foolishness and begged him to take you back." "No!" Charlotte howled. With an imperious shake of her bustle, Fiona turned from the doorway before casting a last piteous look in Charlotte's direction. "Poor little sister, whatever shall we do with you?" Charlotte sank to a bench as she watched her sister sweep from the room with the serene splendour of a schooner in full sail. No doubt she would plunge into the abyss with none other than Derek at the helm. "I thought I heard your voice." No trace of humour tinged her father's gentle greeting. He glanced briefly over his shoulder. "Your sister is lovely tonight." "Positively radiant," Charlotte mumbled glumly. Earnshaw sat next to his daughter, his thin frame teetering on the edge of the bench as he glanced at the sheet music. "Chopin. Pity I missed your performance, my dear. You always had the sweetest touch." "So like your mother." Charlotte rose, exasperated. "Papa, how can you allow Fiona to invite that man into our household after what he has done?" Wearily, Earnshaw stood, taking his daughter's hand. "My dear child, I could no more stop Fiona from receiving Derek than I could stop the sun from rising. She has a right to her happiness, as do you." He squeezed her hand gently. "Our carriage departs for Bristol at daybreak. No doubt it will be an arduous journey. Best you concentrate on a good night's sleep. It may be your last for quite some time." As they strolled through the lofty corridors, Charlotte glanced at the occasional family portrait that gloomily looked down on her in silence. "I've been to the castle, Papa." Earnshaw stopped in mid-stride, a frown furrowing above his spectacles. "You went north? But I have forbidden that area to you." He fixed her with grim disapproval. "I am mightily displeased, child." Charlotte was stung by the rare rebuke. "But why? It is lovely. Just ruins. An old estate. They tell me a witch lives there." Earnshaw clutched Charlotte's hand with unaccustomed severity. Fear drew taut lines across his face. "Promise me, daughter, that you shall never go there again." Charlotte returned the squeeze with a gentle, placating touch. "Of course, Papa. Whatever you say." They stood at the staircase, silent. They were bound by so many things. Charlotte wondered. So many secrets. "Good night, Papa." Charlotte watched his retreat, saw him push spectacles over his nose as he wove an ambling path to his inevitable destination, the library. She knew him so well, and yet she knew him not at all. A low murmur of laughter turned her head, Probably it was Mary, the chambermaid, flirting with the butler. Charlotte hurried from the staircase. She was sick of the sensual cloud that seemed to hang over the house. It both stifled and scared her. Charlotte froze in the dark corridor. She could see them clearly, limbs intertwined. Derek's face was lost in the folds of her bosom, his hands roaming the electric blue satin. Fiona's back was pressed against Charlotte's bedroom door. Charlotte stood before them and met the intoxicated, exultant gaze of her sister as she clutched the burnished doorknob. She pushed them aside, yanking the massive door open with all her weight, finally plunging into the safety of her room, slamming it shut. But she could still hear their laughter.